doing amazing work in Missoula, which is, as we know, a rapidly growing community. And the work that Stoney's doing is all the more important because of that. In a city like Missoula that's changing so quickly, art is so important and so key to be integral to the growth of a city like this that has so many wonderful resources, natural, and this library, which is just an amazing place to spend time, to work, and interact with the community, and just see how civic-minded and forward-thinking this community really is. It's really kind of restored my faith in humanity, I have to say. But I am a New Yorker. I have been coming to Missoula for about 5 years to visit with my family that lives here. And I chose this as a starting image. This is the cover of my second publication. But it was actually photographed in 1996. I was quite young when I took this picture. But it shows the connection between photography and textiles that has existed since the very beginning of my process. When I was just 6 years old in 1996. And obviously, I bought this fabric at a sale that I went to with some of my friends from doing window displays, and we used to shop at these dead stock sales. And this is a home furnishings fabric from the 70s, and I had just enough to make this outfit and the backdrop, and if I backed up 1 inch, you'd see the edges of it stapled to the wall. It's like just barely enough. But this photo ended up being just a kind of a hit and was used for a bazillion magazine covers. And so, it shows connection to textiles from the beginning. Again, this is another outfit that I made, matching background, more dead stock fabric from the 70s, probably from the same sale. And I sort of became known for this. And of course, this is pre-digital, so all this is done analog, on film, medium format film. And I just put these in to sort of show off, I guess, show them why. But then obviously you see this is black sequin fabric here. And this is a bedazzled director's chair. These stars are made out of cardboard covered in glitter. So, I'm not really straying very far from this. This is Nelly Furtado. This is all of these things are from a party store. So these are all like party supplies. So this is actually a bow in her hair that you put on a present. That's Wendy Williams, I just couldn't resist. This is for Peta. She did the I'd rather go naked than wear fur campaign. So that was a fun moment. There's Elvira. And again, as a window dresser, we learned how to cover panels. So I would cut pieces out of wood, put batting, and just staple fabric, and that was a set. I mean, it's a lot of this, so much of this came from window dressing. And when you think about a store window, it's a rectangle, and it has figures inside it. It has a prop. It has a concept that relates to the clothes. It's fashion. So it really, really translates very easily to photography. This is an album cover that I did. This is a recent photo. This is actually from 2019. And I made this gown for him, specifically for his body. He's a dancer. And this photo, I just put it in because I really like it, and also to show that I'm not totally done with photography. I'm just waiting for inspiration to strike. But this is based on the famous John Singer Sargent painting, Madame X, which I read a book about it, and they mentioned how the hand was one of the most awkward poses in art history. I was like, I want to do that hand, so I did. So this is a nod just to the trans community. This is Candace Kane, who, I don't know how much of you watch reality TV, but she's a famous and very beautiful trans woman that I've known for many, many years. This photo, I think, was 1999, something like that. And you can see this is just vinyl. It's this vinyl that we used to get. It's called Cheek to Cheek, and it's it's stuck together, and you peel it open, and it's really glossy on the inside, it looks stuck together. And another member of our beautiful trans community in New York, Paris Gotti. This is one of my first magazine covers. And obviously, you know, I painted that background and did all that. Again. So yeah, so this is just stuff that I did. This is 1996. And again, with the matching background. And so this was, so we're coming up now to the advent of digital photography. So everything you've seen until now has been analog, with the exception of the newer ones. And this I was given an editorial to do in a magazine called Swindle, which is put up by Shepard Fairey. And I worked with some stylists, costume designers that I know, and we decided to do something based on daguerreotypes and tintypes. And so we did this, and it was using digital technology. These frames are actually made and handmade and hand-painted with layers of cardboard. But then I photographed them and sandwiched everything in Photoshop. So it's using technology to make old-looking photos. But everybody freaked out about this editorial and loved it. And it was a departure for me, and it kind of brought me to the up to the point where, I mean, sort of in the trajectory, we're sort of now in the mid-2000s, but it kind of brought me up to whatever's next here. Oh yeah, so this idea of daguerreotypes and Frederick Douglass. And what happened was the Trayvon Martin verdict. And when the George Zimmerman got off, and the inception of BLM was a real moment that I really felt really deeply, just because of whatever, all my friends of color and people that I hung out with for years, and being a member of the queer community, and I felt the need to make work about it. And it just so happened that I read this article about Frederick Douglass. It's called "How Artists Changed the World" in the New York Times. And it was about his process of having himself photographed as a former slave, as a free man going out into the world, speaking about slavery and being photographed again and again. He was the most photographed man, I think, of the 19th century because of his idea. He believed that photography could change people's perceptions, so he believed that photography had the power to change the world, to end racism by presenting a black man as a sophisticated, worldly, educated person. He believed that he could change people's views about black people, people of color, slavery. He did this practice his whole life, and there's hundreds and hundreds of these photos. So it went hand in hand with this sort of editorial that I did, and then I was really deciding, I knew that when digital photography was in full swing and we all had camera phones and we were all on Instagram and Facebook, I knew it was time for me to get out. I was just not happy sitting in front of a computer. I was sick and tired of social media. I felt like a photograph that took 2 weeks to craft deserved more than a 20-hour shelf life on Instagram. I just felt like my work was too good for Instagram, just because it took too long to make, and the craft was all gone out of it, and there was no discernment anymore between a bathroom selfie and a photograph that took, costume designing and sewing and building a set, and really, I just was not happy, and I was really thinking really hard about the textile aspect of my practice, my sewing practice, and how could I reconcile photography and sewing, how could I bring these things together and include some social justice issues, and I was thinking really hard all the time. So I was very busy thinking for a long time, and so this is a huge concept for me. Is Wabi-Sabi is just something that I think all got a crash course in during the pandemic, and it goes hand in hand with mindfulness. it's basically just accepting the marks of existence, and it's a beautiful philosophy of healing, accepting the sort of damage that we do, and embracing flaws and flawed processes. And it is on view here in these Boro textiles from Japan that I was also became totally obsessed with and could not stop looking at these things. These were worn by farmers in the 17th and 18th and 19th centuries who would make these indigo garments that were clothes and then just patch them and patch them and patch them and patch them until they were just all solid patches. These textiles are now revered and highly collectible and shown in museums. But this Wabi-Sabi philosophy is illustrated perfectly in this, and you can see how beautiful they are. It's just insanely beautiful to me. I was obsessed with this, and the idea of taking something that was so damaged and just fixing it over and over and over again, and sort of the way we sort of pull things apart and put them back together, like work really hard to do something and to accomplish something and then just go and ruin it, you know what I mean? And then have to put it back together. So that's what I do. I don't know what y'all do, but that's what I do. Again, more Boro textiles. And so these are the things that I was looking at in sort of transitioning from a photographer to a textile artist. So this is my thought process. And then we have Krusty Punks, which is basically an American version of Boro textiles. It's contemporary, but it's exactly the same thing. It's the same philosophy of repair and just constant repair and sustainability. And then you have all this layered beauty and history contained in the garment that has lived through so many different experiences and carries all this energy and all this memory in it, and it's beautiful stuff. I mean, so you can talk about Japanese textiles, but here we are in America with the same thing. And then kintsugi is a Japanese practice, and I'm not very eloquent about this, but if anybody else knows more about it than I do. It's wooden, it's pottery. It's an extension of Wabi-Sabi philosophy, but it's a practice of repairing pottery with gold. So to show that something that's been broken and put back together is actually more loved and more valuable than something that is brand new. So it's an ancient idea, but it goes back to Eastern philosophy and sustainability, and again the process of healing, the process of fixing things, the process of repairing things, and not throwing things away, and the value of an object that's been repaired increases because it was loved enough to be repaired, right? So this is a concept that I really, really love and really attached to, and I wanted to apply it to people. So I put an ad on Craigslist. If anybody remembers Craigslist, I put an ad out for models, and I wanted to make work that was talking about all these ideas and talking about Frederick Douglass's work and talking about social justice. And this is at the inception of BLM. This is like 2014. And so I started doing these portraits where I would really carefully style the models in a mixture of modern, branded clothing, and clothing that sort of looked old. And it was a lot of styling. And these guys were really into it. They were super, super into it. They were very happy to participate in this project. And so I started doing this, and again, it's like the same process in Photoshop of aging things, layering with distressed surfaces. I was going out and photographing rusty doors and photographing the ground and photographing all kinds of distressed surfaces and then layering them over the photos. And so this, suddenly I just got the idea to print them on linen. Well, I wouldn't say suddenly, but I just arrived at this idea of printing them on linen and applying this sort of, I felt a little lame about cutting it up because of the because it wasn't wear, like I felt dishonest about doing that. But then I said, you know, it's art, so the cutting and slashing is decorative. So there's, you know, for something to be decorative is valid. That's valid. So I just did it. And I got these printed on linen. They're big. They're like this big. And then I hand stitched and hand colored them, and did this sort of sashiko stitching, which is the boro textile. That's the name for it, is sashiko stitching. It's thread from Japan that I got, and so I did these, and again, there's that guy, and then there he is in linen, and so this is how I first married photography and textiles. This is my first actual combination of photography and textiles, and people liked it, so I was really happy. I actually was able to get my first residency with these, and then there's this guy, and then you can see him in linen, and so that got me going on this, and you can see as time went on, I got a little bolder with the roto cutter, and then I put them in the laundry. And I mean, linen, I just fell in love with linen because of the way it deconstructs and the way it falls apart, and how it responds so beautifully to wear and tear. And you can really beat it up, and it just gets more and more beautiful and more confused. So there's that guy. And so these were great, but I had to stop doing this project because I got really interested, well, for a lot of reasons, but because I got really interested in quilting, which is a practice that I have been doing privately for a long time. And this is just a bear claw quilt. I just put it in there because of all the bear encounters that are happening. But you can see this is a traditional bear claw design, and the wonderful thing about quilts is that they're almost like jazz. They're kind of an American art form, or rock and roll. I mean, I don't think they were invented here, but they really are. So, I mean, anybody who knows about quilting knows it's a big deal. It's a really big deal. There's quilting traditions, there's regional quilting styles, there's quilting traditions that go all over the country and get really, really, really interesting. This is a crazy quilt that I'm obsessed with these right now, and I will probably be making some crazy quilts pretty soon. I just need to look at some in person to figure out how they did it, but yeah, so Gee's Bend, if anybody knows the quilts of Gee's Bend, really, really just amazing stuff, and it was picked up in the 70s by art galleries, and it was shown alongside modernism. I mean, you can see the parallels, but just wonderful traditions. And these are, I went to this show at the New York Craft Museum of Soldiers' Quilts, and I love these because this is a male quilting tradition that was soldiers convalescing in field hospitals, making quilts from the uniforms of their fallen comrades. And so these soldiers would sit and convalesce and hand stitch these quilts. And they're just like mind-blowing in person. And I just love these so much. And I didn't know about them. It was just a brand new thing that I learned about. And they're quite beautiful. And so you see all these traditions, and these are Masonic banners, which again, I became obsessed with this stuff. Like I bought books on it, and I just love this. Like, how can you go wrong with that? So yeah, I mean, modesty, these are all virtues, right? On a banner. And it was really amazing meeting Christina because I felt really close to her work with the flags she's doing. She does flags. So this is Sanford Biggers. So this guy is a huge deal right now. He's a contemporary artist, and he uses antique quilts and cuts them up and does all kinds of crazy three-dimensional things, throws paint on them, does all kinds of stuff, like mashes them together. And his work is very interesting, and he's a really big deal right now. He just had a show in the Bronx Museum, so you see he's like painting, this is silver, and I think he gets these quilts on eBay for cheap because they're damaged. He gets like damaged quilts that are just kind of ruined and takes them and makes this amazing art with them. And his work is very exciting. And this is the guy whose career is like right now. This is Rosalie Tompkins. She, I think, I mean, don't quote me, but I think she comes out of the cheese bend tradition. And these are called improvisational quilts, and they're just wild all over the map. So again, Rosalie Tompkins. This is now a really bad quilt that I made in 2006, but I'm just putting it out there because it goes back to me just quilting as a person, not as an artist. And I did this because I was having a hard time. so it kind of goes back to the Masonic Banners. I like words, I like symbolism, and I made this out of old jeans. And then I made this one out of ties. And this was ties that were opened up and flattened out. And this is a learning quilt. I made so many mistakes on this stupid thing. This is all shibori dyed sheets, bed sheets. This is all stippled, which is a free motion sewing technique. I learned a lot about fusibles when I was making this quilt because I didn't realize that silk, you can't just sew silk onto cotton, it doesn't work. So I had learned the hard way that I had to like fuse all the ties to a backing to get them to lay flat. And the reason I chose this word was just because it popped into my head. But it's the one thing when I was doing a lot of photography, the last photography that I did, it was always like these guys would be like, oh, that's dope. And you knew it was like the ultimate seal of approval that you made the cut. When somebody said that, it was like, it was a wrap, like you did well. So I was just like, okay, I'm just gonna do this. And so this quilt was a real pain in the ass, but I got it done. It's a little rough, but I felt ready to do this quilt after that, which is huge. It's 11 feet tall. You can see that's my ceiling, so it's a little bit taller than the ceiling. And I'm there just to show scale. So this is the original photograph of the guy that I took in my apartment, and then in Photoshop I reduced it to 6 colors, and then I printed it out in all these 11 by 17 sheets and taped them all together. And you can see like I made a map of all of it. You can see how small a lot of the pieces were. I mean, I think these were his eyes. I think that's actually an eye. So there it is in my sewing machine. You can see. It was like wrestling a bear. And I, that Juki can really take a pounding, believe me. I lost my temper many times. So there it is. So this is all made out of men's suits. And I had a printout of all the fancy like theory things that I attached to this image, but I forgot to print it out. But it's basically about having a bunch of suits that are no longer useful because you no longer have a job and you're no longer employable, and basically trying to find like an occupation or vocation outside of traditional masculine work. Right, so this is about masculinity and work and sort of the power, like the symbolism of a suit and what it means, and it's like economic class stuff and all kinds of stuff. So then this photo, I love this photo. I work with this guy all the time. He's a dancer, and as you can see, he's very beautiful. And so I did this from this picture. And again, it's the same technique. This is all made out of repurposed denim. And I did the same thing, just reduced the photo to 6 values, and then traced each value out, and then hand cut it. And then I decided to add these shoulders to it because I thought it was too sentimental by itself. So yeah, I did the studs and chains, and that was a reference back to sort of my punk rock days. And I also like the sort of language of describing something, saying it's denim studs and chains. It's rock and roll. I mean, it sounds good when you say it. So I like when you can say the materials and they sound really cool. Like that's always really attractive to me. So this is a pivotal moment for me. This is my best friend, and he got cancer and died, and it was really devastating. Terrible, terrible battle with cancer. And he was younger than me, and so and of course he died without a will, and his parents came and just swooped in and took everything, and all I got was this bag of his old clothes. So of course it's time to make a memorial quilt, right? So I got this residency at Mass MoCA, and I said, I got to do this, and so I made this out of his old clothes, and some of my old clothes, some of the clothes that we wore. He was the guy that used to do all the artwork for my photo shoots, and we would build sets together, and we worked together all the time. So there's a lot of clothing in here that has actually paint on it from things that we made together, times that we worked together. And there was actually a matchbook in this pocket with a phone number in it from a night that I know we were out together drunk, and he was a man magnet, so like he was getting numbers left and right. But this piece was it was very important because when my friends would come to look at it, they would just start crying, and I felt power. It made me feel powerful. It made me feel like I had some control over something. Like I was able to harness the energies that were sort of residing in these garments and these fibers that were lived in and that were really integral to his identity. And there was real power there, and I started to feel like there's really something here. There's really something that can be kind of harnessed and worked with. And so I made this one after that. And these are all shirts that were given to me by a very close friend of mine who likes to go on cruises and buy really ugly shirts and never wear them again. So he gave you all these shirts. They're expensive cotton shirting, but he's also somebody that's been very good to me in terms of like throwing me work, throwing me freelance gigs, and there's an industriousness to our relationship. And so I, again, was referring to Masonic symbols. The beehive as like a symbol of community and industriousness and the community working together, much like this library is kind of like a beehive, right? And these are embroidered bees that are being chased out by these invasive hornets. So it's really about gentrification, and it's about being insecurely housed. It's about the sort of avarice that comes with real estate and property and developers. And honey serves as dual purpose. It's a queer expletive, like a honey, like I've had it, and also honey is the object of lust and desire, right? So this is an allegorical quilt, and here we have like the spider webs just represent nature lying in wait. Waiting to just come and take everything back. So, and this guy was another one of there's a photo that I took of this guy that I just loved, and this is a second stab. I tried doing this one and I just ruined it, and I put it away, but I still have the map, so I recut it in leather. This is python and silver and blue metallic leather. This is lizard, and more python, black leather, and this is vintage denim. And I was really wanting to make it like super 70s. And you can see the foreshortened blocks coming forward. And I don't know if you guys know that band LaBelle, they did that song Lady Marmalade, but they had these outfits, silver outfits that were made like, and I was directly referencing them. But this guy, I just love how he's just like eased into his masculinity so effortlessly that he's just like sitting and just occupying his identity with so much swagger and ease. Anybody who's ever tried to perform masculine identity knows how difficult that is. It's not easy to do, and he's just totally owning it. So it's really about this braggadocio and like just occupying your identity. And I was really interested in three-dimensional shapes, and I got really obsessed with the tumbling block pattern. Right, so I was like, I gotta do the tumbling blocks because everything I do has this sort of forced perspective and sort of forced depth to it. So I did this out of corduroys, and it was a napping quilt. It's for naps. I made it for napping. It's just a simple quilt. But then I made this quilt, which is on my bed at home, hopefully not getting attacked by moths. But this is a tumbling block quilt that I interspersed with this Alexander Henry, who does these crazy printed fabrics, so like, wild, he does wild stuff. And this is Aztecs, and so this is sort of an allegory for sort of crumbling civilizations and tumbling blocks, tumbling cultures, civilizations, buildings falling down, the end of the world. And you can see I decided to hand stitch this. What a perfect thing to do during a pandemic. I mean, I felt like sorry for anyone who wasn't a quilter during lockdown in New York. It was just the absolute perfect thing to do, and it really took me forever to hand stitch this quilt. But there it is. So this quilt, and I really wish I had my printout now because I wrote a big long thing about this, but this is an 11-foot long quilt. It's free-pieced with curved piecing from more of that crazy Alexander Henry fabric. I made it when I was in residence at Yaddo. It took forever. It's all hand-stitched in a chevron pattern, and it's 11 feet long. So, and I sewed all these embroidered name tags from uniforms on it. And this is about just identity, visibility, having to wear a name tag on your uniform and what that says about how visible you are, about class, about usefulness, and just all kinds of stuff. And it's got glass beads and pions on it too. So I had a big fancy thing to say about it, but whatever. If you guys want to grill me on it, I'll try to be more eloquent about it. Yeah, so there's a close-up of that. And it's called Numbers. So it does refer back to the famous Kraftwerk song Numbers because of the rhythm of it, and also John Ricci's famous queer novel called Numbers, where it's about this OCD guy who's just like sleeping with as many people as he can and keeping track of everything. So, okay, so now it's time to talk about Olga the Emerald, who is an artist that I discovered while I was visiting the Museum of Art and Design in New York, and I was in the basement waiting for the elevator, and there was this thing on the wall that just blew my mind, and I couldn't even believe it. And it's Olga the Emerald, who's a Colombian artist. She is a grand figure in Colombia. She's still alive, she's very old, she's in her 80s, but I mean, she's just insane. Beautiful, beautiful stuff. And her stuff is really sculptural, and you can see how she's covering fabric in gold leaf and stitching it and using leather, and it refers a lot back to the history of Colombia, like ancient Colombian cultures and stuff like that that I don't really know very much about, but I mean, come on, Olga, right? Just insane. And this, I mean, so elegant and simple and just mind-blowing. And these things are huge. I think these are beads. I think they're all gold beads. I mean, it's just insanely elegant and simple. So I made this. So this is made up of tetrahedrons, which are these guys. They're 3-sided pyramids. This is the simplest 3D structure that occurs in nature, and I think the strongest. And I woke up one morning with a hangover and just started cutting triangles and taping them together. And then I found this fabric in the garment district in New York, and it's like Georgette that's very stiff. It has like it's almost like paper. And so it was the perfect thing. So I just sewed this together really fast, and it was really cool. It's like a sculpture. It looks great, like sticks off the wall. And so then I was like, for the first time, not working figuratively, working in the abstract, not doing portraiture. And I made this next, and this is just an assemblage of linen scraps that were sliced off the ends of those portraits that I made out of linen. And I just went full on with the stitching and hand embroidered thousands of sequins on this. It's all hand dyed. And I took it around with me and asked my family members and people to stitch with me, and so it was collecting energy and collecting memory and sort of gaining meaning as I traveled around with it. It's like a kind of celestial, crystallized memory thing. And then we have COVID, right? So you can see I'm like taking you on a linear journey here. So this is called Onset, and it's about COVID. It's the early days of COVID, when it was just like this thing arriving out of nowhere. And it's like, what is it? It was like really
alien-ish.
Yeah, it has like a hardness to it. It's all like made out of materials that you would never use in a quilt. Materials that you do not want against your skin. It's spandex, sequins, vinyl coated glitter, and it's all zigzagged, and it's just about the otherness of the moment, like sort of this brilliant horror of the moment. So I did that, and then I did this, and this is Sashiko dyed linen, and it's all hand embroidered with glass bugle beads, like antique Czech glass beads that are black, jet black, and cobalt blue. I was going through a difficult time. I was in grief. I lost my best friend to COVID, and I also lost all my gigs and everything. So I was having a rough time, and I was listening to neuroscience podcasts to try to understand the chemistry of grief and just how your brain works, and the left brain and the right brain. And so these embroidered shapes just sort of manifested as neuron shapes, because this is a very, very slow process. This took 8 months to embroider. I'm working almost every day, just one bead at a time. It was insane. And it weighs a lot. It weighs like 10 pounds. It's 10 pounds of glass. And I just, one night I just went and put cigarette burns all over it. Like I was going through it, as we all were. But this is what I did with my time, and so it's heavy, physically heavy and emotionally heavy. It's a heavy piece. And I'm calling these feeling catchers because I really like this whole jargon of catching feelings. I think it's really funny when the young people talk about catching feelings. It's almost like catching something, like catching a disease or whatever. And these are physically feeling catchers. I mean, when you're sitting there stitching one thing at a time, it's like everything you're going through goes right into it. And so it is a feeling catcher. And then this one was made out of just whatever I had left over, and it is about I mean, at the time I was calling it a prayer quilt. I don't really know if I would call it that now. I think it's more of a invocation, but it's just about sort of trauma and dissociative disorder and sort of reclaiming your power to say no, to say stop, and it's about addiction and sexual assault and all kinds of fun stuff. But it also, again, like that honey quilt, it is also kind of a double meaning, and it has like the queer vernacular, and it really is camp because it's making light of horror, which is a very camp thing to do, which the Metropolitan Museum got wrong, but whatever. And it has trapunto things, like blisters sticking out that are stitched over. It's like, oh, stop, you know, and then, but stop. so, and anybody can assign whatever meaning they want to something like this. Okay, so this is now, I'm kind of getting more into the present moment, and this is a rust dye. So this is linen, and I guess there's a bandana in there, layered with steel wool and vinegar and salt that I just put in some chicken wire and threw out on my fire escape, and it snowed, and the snow melted through it, and you can see all those beautiful tones coming through. And it's an eco-dye process, and that was just before I came out here. So this is all rust-dyed linen and doilies. And I was able to get some beautiful oranges and blacks and different colors with the rust, just with the steel wool. And so this is sort of what brought me to the point of coming out here to Missoula. And I said, well, what can I do with this residency? I'm taking a plane, I can only ship what I can ship, so I just went and bought a whole bunch of linen and a whole bunch of RIT dye and shipped it out here. And let's see what's next. And there I am in the kitchen downstairs with my witch's brew and dyeing, doing shibori processes, which it involves like wrapping, folding, and pleating. So I dyed all this fabric. As you see this piece here, all this is raw linen that I bought in the garment district in New York that I dyed here inside the library on the stove. And there's all my stuff hanging up in the kitchen. So you can see I did different colors. Some of these guys, I brought some of these guys. I don't know if you're interested in looking at this one. And yeah, that's me. That's my Betsy Ross photo. And really now we're kind of, yeah, so this is these doilies were given to me by a friend whose mother made them, passed away, and he gave them to me and sort of challenged me to do something with them. And so I said, well, let me bring them out to Missoula. And so I did this. This is actually hands. And so, you know, fire and ice, right? Not rocket surgery. As this is a place-based residency, clearly fire is a big part of the environment. It's in the air. So we have that piece out there, which is a fire piece. You all saw when you walked in. And I think that's a wrap, guys. I think that's my talk.